Listen, squirrels, I want to go, woo! Thank you, Jesus. But I'm a little bit nauseated. I think it's coming from sinus issues. I still have to go pick up some meds after a while, but my doc appointment, guess what it is? A hernia. I almost knew it. But then I was thinking diverticulitis and some other not so great things. So thank you, Jesus, and thank you for all the prayers. And he just said, we'll watch it. And he told me some things that I could do if I have another episode to, make it better, hopefully. And if I have to have surgery, I have to have surgery. But for right now, he's not talking that, and I'm glad. So, yay. And I got these, I don't know if you can tell, but bags packed under my eyes. I think it's all sinusy issues. But anyway, possible cellulitis in my right leg. I told you I had, I'm going to go over all this junk in live today. So we'll have a health discussion in our reading today. Let's go on to chapter 10. His remarks on the subject of Miss Marple as we left the house were far from complimentary. I really believe that wizened-up old maid thinks she knows everything there is to know, and hardly been out of this village all her life. Preposterous. What can she know of life? I say mildly that though doubtless Miss Marple knew next to nothing of life, with the capital L, she knew practically everything that went on in St. Mary Mead. Melchett admitted that grudgingly. She was a valuable witness, particularly valuable from Mrs. Prothero's point of view. I suppose there's no doubt about what she says, eh? If Miss Marple says she had no pistol with her, you can take it for granted that it is so, I said. If there was the least possibility of such a thing, Miss Marple would have been on to it like a knife. That's true enough. We'd better go and have a look at the studio. The so-called studio was a mere rough shed with a skylight. There were no windows, and the door was the only means of entrance or egress. Satisfied on this score, Melchett announced his intention of visiting the vicarage with the inspector. I'm going to the police station now. As I entered through the front door, a murmur of voices caught my ear. I opened the drawing-room door. On the sofa beside Griselda, conversing animatedly, sat Mrs. Gladys Cram. Her legs, which were encased in particularly shiny pink stockings, were crossed, and I had every opportunity of observing that she wore pink striped silk knickers. Gosh. Hello, Lynn, said Griselda. Good morning, Mr. Clement, said Miss Cram. Isn't the news about the Colonel really too awful? Poor old gentleman. Miss Cram, said my wife, very kindly came in to offer to help us with the guides. We asked for helpers last Sunday, you remember. I did remember, and I was convinced, and so I knew from her tone, was Griselda, that the idea of enrolling herself among them would never have occurred to Miss Cram but for the exciting incident which had taken place at the vicarage. I was only just saying to Mrs. Clement, went on Miss Cram, you could have struck me all of a heap when I heard the news. A murder, I said, in this quiet one-horse village? For quiet it is, you must admit, not so much as a picture house. And as for talkies, and then when I heard it was Colonel Prothero, why, I simply couldn't believe it. He didn't seem the kind, somehow, to get murdered. And so, said Griselda, Miss Cram came round to find out all about it. I feared this plain speaking might offend the lady, but she merely flung her head back and laughed uproariously, showing every tooth she possessed. "That's too bad. You're a sharp one, aren't you, Mrs. Clement? But it's only natural, isn't it, to want to hear the ins and outs of a case like this? And I'm sure I'm willing enough to help with the guides in any way you like. Exciting, that's what it is. I've been stagnating for a bit of fun. I have. Really, I have. Not that my job isn't a very good one, well paid, and Dr. Stone quite the gentleman in every way, but a girl wants a bit of life out of office hours, and except for you, Mrs. Clement, who is there in the place to talk to except a lot of old cats? There's Lettuce Prothero," I said. Gladys Cram tossed her head. "She's too high and mighty for the likes of me, fancies herself the country, and wouldn't demean herself by noticing a girl who had to work for a living, but not but what I did hear her talking of earning a living herself. And who'd employ her, I should like to know. Why, she'd be fired in less than a week, unless she went as one of those mannequins all dressed up and sidling about. She could do that, I expect." "She'd make a very good mannequin," said Griselda. "She's got a lovely figure. There's nothing of the cat about Griselda. When was she talking of her earning her own living?" Miss Cram seemed momentarily discomfited, but recovered herself with her usual archness. "That would be telling, wouldn't it?" she said. "But she did say so. Things not very happy at home, I fancy. Catch me living at home with a stepmother, I wouldn't sit down under it for a minute." "Ah, but you're so high-spirited and independent," said Griselda gravely, and I looked at her with suspicion. Miss Cram was clearly pleased. "That's right. That's me all over. Can be led, not driven. A palmist told me that not so long ago. No, I'm not one to sit down and be bullied, and I've made it clear all along to Dr. Stone that I must have my regular times off. These scientific gentlemen, they think a girl's a kind of machine. Half the time they just don't notice her or remember she's there." "Of course I don't know much about it," confessed the girl. "Do you find Dr. Stone pleasant to work with? It must be an interesting job if you're interested in archaeology," says Yarn Geek Live, but I don't think she comes on live anymore. We'll see. Excuse me. Yarn Geek, Yarn Geek, Yarn Geek, Ginger, Yarn Geek. Nope, don't think so. Okay, now where was I? Did I just say? As if y'all could answer me. I think I just said, do you find Dr. Stone pleasant to work with? It must be an interesting job if you're interested in archaeology. It still seems to me that digging up people that are dead and have been dead for hundreds of years isn't, well, seems a bit nosy, doesn't it? And there's Dr. Stone so wrapped up in it all that half the time he'd forget his meals if it wasn't for me. Is he at the Barrow this evening? Asked Griselda. Miss Cram shook her head. A bit under the weather this morning, she explained, not up to doing any work. That means a holiday for little Gladys. I'm sorry, I said. Oh, it's nothing much. There's not going to be a second death, but do tell me, Mr. Clement. I hear you've been with the police all morning. What do they think? Well, I said slowly, there's still a little uncertainty. Ah, cried Miss Cram. Then they don't think it's Mr. Lawrence Redding after all? So handsome, isn't he? Just like a movie star, and such a nice smile when he says good morning to you. I really couldn't believe my ears when I heard the police had arrested him. Still, one has always heard they're very stupid, the country police. Itchy eyeball. Been drinking my water, but I'm treating myself. My stomach's just a little. And like I said, I think that's from sinus issues. Gotta go back out in the cold to get meds. It is so cold. I know it's not nearly as cold as where some of you guys are, but it's cold to me. It's not going to make it out of the 30s today. You can hardly blame them in this instance, I said. Mr. Redding came in and gave himself up. What? The girl was clearly dumbfounded. Well, of all the poor fish, if I'd committed a murder, I wouldn't go straight off and give myself up. I should have thought Lawrence Redding would have had more sense to give in like that. What did he kill Prothero for, did he say? Was it just a quarrel? It's not absolutely certain that he did kill him, I said. But surely if he says he has, why really, Mr. Clement, he ought to know. He ought to know, certainly, I agreed, but the police are not satisfied with the story. But why should he say he'd done it if he hasn't? That was a point on which I had no intention of enlightening Miss Cram. Instead, I said rather vaguely, I believe that in all prominent murder cases, the police receive numerous letters from people accusing themselves of the crime. Miss Cram's reception of this piece of information was... Hang on. Miss Cram's reception of this piece of information was, they must be chumps, in a tone of wonder and scorn. Well, she said with a sigh, I suppose I must be trotting along. She rose. Mr. Redding accusing himself of the murder will be a bit of news of Dr. Stone. Is he interested? Asked Griselda. Miss Cram furrowed her brows perplexedly. He's a queer one. You never can tell with him, all wrapped up in the past. He'd 100 times rather look at nasty old Wait a minute. All wrapped up in the past. He'd 100 times rather look at a nasty old bronze knife out of those humps of ground than he would see the knife Crippen cut up his wife with, supposing he had a chance to. Well, I said, I must confess I agree with him. Miss Cram's eyes expressed incomprehension and slight contempt. Then, with reiterated goodbyes, she took her pleasure. Not such a bad sort, really, said Griselda as the door closed behind her. Terribly common, of course, but one of those big, bouncing, good-humored girls that you can't dislike. I wonder what really brought her here. Curiosity. Yes, I suppose so. Now, Lynn, tell me all about it. I'm simply dying to hear. I sat down and recited faithfully all the happenings of the morning, Griselda interpolating the narrative in little exclamations of surprise and interest. So it was Anne Lawrence. Was after all along. So it was Anne Lawrence was after all along. Not lettuce? How blind we've all been. That must have been what old Miss Marple was hinting at yesterday, don't you think so? Yes, I said, averting my eyes. Mary entered. There's a couple of men here come from a newspaper, so they say. You want to see them? No, I said, certainly not. Refer them to Inspector Slack at the police station. Mary nodded and turned away. And when you've got rid of them, I said, come back here. There's something I want to ask you. Mary nodded again. It was some few minutes before she returned. Had a job getting rid of them, she said, persistent. You never saw anything like it. Wouldn't take no for an answer. I expect we shall be a good deal troubled with them, I said. Now, Mary, what I want to ask you is this. Are you quite certain you didn't hear the shot yesterday evening? The shot what killed him? No, of course I didn't. If I had have done, I should have gone in to see what had happened. Yes, but I was remembering Miss Marple's statement that she had heard a shot in the woods. I changed the form of my question. Did you hear any other shot? One down in the wood, for instance? Oh, that. The girl paused. Yes, now I come to think of it, I believe I did. Not like a lot of shots. Just one. Queer sort of bang it was. Exactly, I said. Now what time was that? Time? Yes, time. I couldn't say, I'm sure. Well after tea time. I do know that. Can't you get a little nearer than that? No, I can't, and I've got my work to do, haven't I? I can't go on looking at clocks the whole time, and it wouldn't be much good anyway. The alarm loses a good 3/4 every day. And what with putting it on and one thing and another, I'm never exactly sure what time it is. This perhaps explains why our meals are never punctual. They're sometimes too late and sometimes bewilderingly early. Was it going to before? Was it going? Was it long before Mr. Redding came? No, it wasn't long. 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, not longer than that. I nodded my head, satisfied. Is that all? Said Mary, because what I mean to say is... What I mean to say is... Come on. Is that all? Because what I mean to say is I've got the joint in the oven, and I guess that's meat, and the pudding boiling over as likely as not. That's all right, you can go. She left the room and I turned to Griselda. Is it quite out of the question to induce Mary to say sir or ma'am? I've told her she doesn't remember. She's just a raw girl, remember? A few... No. She's just a raw girl. I'm perfectly aware of that, I said, but raw things do not necessarily remain raw forever. I feel a tinge of cooking might be induced in Mary. Well, I don't agree with you, said Griselda. You know how little we can afford to pay a servant. If once we got her smartened up at all, she'd have to leave. Or she'd leave, naturally, and get higher wages. But as long as Mary can't cook and has those awful manners, well, we're safe. Nobody else would have her. I'm about to freeze in here. I think I'm going to go turn on this little heater. It's going to make a terrible noise at first, but then it'll calm down. Got my leg all wrapped. I'm a mess, y'all. But it could be worse. I'm tickled. I'm tickled at what the doc said. Thank you, Lord. Oh. Supposed to be staying off of this leg as much as I can. And oops. Sorry, I hate to do that. I know it makes a crazy big noise. It didn't make too bad of a noise, did it? Ugh. But I do have to go to the doggone drugstore. I might see if they'll deliver. I think they do. Oh, mercy. All right. Oh, darn. Messed up my pages and get higher wages. Okay, nobody would have her. I perceived that my wife's methods of housekeeping were not so entirely haphazard as I had imagined. A certain amount of reasoning underlay them. Whether it was worthwhile having a maid at the price of her not being able to cook, and having a habit of throwing dishes and remarks at one with the same disconcerting abruptness was a debatable matter. And anyway, continued Griselda, you must make allowances for her manners being worse than usual just now. You can't expect her to feel exactly sympathetic about Colonel Prothero's death when he jailed her young man. Did he jail her young man? Yes, for poaching. You know that man, Archer? Mary's been walking out with him for 2 years. I didn't know that. Walking out with him. Darling Lynn, you never know anything. It's queer, I said, that everyone says the shot came from the woods. I don't think it's queer at all, said Griselda. You see, one so often hears shots in the wood. So naturally, when you do hear a shot, you just assume, as a matter of course, that it is in the wood. It probably just sounds a bit louder than usual. Of course, if one were in the next room, you'd realize that it was in the house, but from Mary's kitchen with the window right the other side of the house, I don't believe you'd ever think of such a thing. The door opened again. Colonel Melchett's back, said Mary, and that police inspector with him, and they say they'd be glad if you joined them. They're in the study. And that's it. So that takes us to chapter 11. I probably won't read any more today. Hope you're enjoying. For some reason, this book, and it could be me and the way it's laid out or something, I'm not reading it. I don't feel like I'm reading it as well. That it flows. You know what I mean? Where's my earrings? I gotta go eat some soup and cornbread, y'all. Finally got my cornbread. That's the highest cornbread I've ever made in my life. I had put on the list, my brother went shopping for us. He's a saint. And I had put self-rising cornmeal, and then I struck out the self-rising and just put self-rising flour. Well, he got self-rising both. It's a little on the salty side. Not too bad, but oh my gosh. It's high cornbread. It's good. Did take a little bit longer to get done in the middle, but it was good. I love to crumble it up in my soup. Yummy. Veggie beef soup. That's what I'm going to have. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. I'll be live at 5, hopefully. Good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise and my belly stays feeling good and sinuses and all that stuff. I'm so tickled, yay! Just a hernia, woohoo! Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. I probably said that. All right, love you. Bye.